So good evening everyone, welcome back. Myself Pushpender Singh and we are going to start with our daily current affairs. So today you have 29th of July 2021 and these lectures are useful for those who are preparing for the civil services examination which is conducted by the UPSC. Alright, so let's begin with the lecture. So the first news is all about the pneumonia. So recently a sample registration system report have provided, right, the report related to the pneumonia. This sample registration system report, which is basically related to the data from 2010 to 2013, which has been provided by the Registrar General of India. Right, recently it has been informed that the pneumonia contributes around 16.9% of the infant deaths in our country, which is also the second highest cause of the infant mortality in our country. Now let us understand about the pneumonia. The pneumonia is basically an inflammatory condition, right, specifically in the lungs that are affecting primarily the air sacs, which are also known as the alveoli. The main causes of the pneumonia, right, in the specifically in the infants are basically the bacteria, virus, fungi that can lead to the pneumonia. So top causes include, for example, your flu virus, okay, your cold virus, maybe then you have the RSV virus, that is the top cause of the pneumonia, specifically in the babies, that is aged, right, the 1 or the younger years, right, or the bacteria which is also called the streptococcus pneumonia. So that is also called the streptococcus, that is the name of the bacteria, the streptococcus pneumonia, right, that is also causing, right, the specifically the infections related to the pneumonia. Now how it is spread, as you know that the pneumonia is basically a contagious disease that can spread through the coughing or sneezing also, and it can spread through the fluids like the blood during the childbirth or from contaminated surfaces also. The common symptoms related to the pneumonia is the cough with phlegm or the fevers, chills, or difficulty in the breathing. That is the main cause, right. Now let us understand about the status of the pneumonia in our country, right. As per the UNICEF data, more than 1 lakh children under the age of 5 years dies every year, right, due to the pneumococcal disease, right. And the top 5 contributors to the India's pneumococcal the pneumonia burden in terms of the number of cases and the deaths were basically UP, which is having the highest contribution in terms of the pneumococcal disease, then followed by Bihar, then Madhya Pradesh, then Rajasthan and Jharkhand. These are the 5 states where the maximum load or the maximum contributors towards the death of the children, specifically from this pneumococcal disease, right. If you see in terms of the global burden of that particular disease, right, the Democratic Republic of Congo, right, which is a country in Africa, right, the Ethiopia, India, Nigeria and Pakistan, all these 5 countries account for almost 50% of the all deaths due to the pneumonia among the children which are less than 5 years of age. So these 5 countries: Congo, Ethiopia, India, Nigeria and Pakistan, right. Now let us understand what are the initiatives which have started, right, to fight this pneumonia in the children specifically. So the first is the Global Action Plan for the Pneumonia and the Diarrhea, that is also known as the GAP-PD. So it is basically an effort which is led by the World Health Organization, right, as well as the UNICEF, okay, to accelerate the disease prevention and the control, right. The second is Integrated Action Plan for the Prevention and the Control of the Pneumonia and the Diarrhea, that is also known as IAPPD. That is, it was launched basically in the year of 2014 to undertake some sort of a collaborative efforts toward the prevention of the diarrhea and the pneumonia, right, related deaths among the children which are less than 5 years of age. The next is the Global Forum on the Childhood Pneumonia, that is the initiative of the 9 leading health and the children's organization that include the UNICEF, right, as well as the Bill and the Melinda Gates Foundation, right? Melinda Gates Foundation, along with the Gavi, right? So these are the organizations, along with 9 leading health and children's organizations, basically started this forum to prevent the pneumonia among the children. Then the social awareness and the actions to neutralize the pneumonia successfully initiative, that is also known as the SANS initiative. It is aiming to reduce the child mortality due to the pneumonia, right, which contribute to around 15% of the deaths of the children under age of 5 annually. So its main purpose is to reduce the child mortality, right, to around 15% of the deaths of the children. Now the vaccine which have been recently been developed for the controlling of this pneumonia is basically your the pneumococcal conjugative vaccine, right, which have been recommended for the prevention of this pneumonia, specifically in the children's. Next, the World Economic Forum, right, outlook report, okay, that is 2021. So recently the IMF have released the World Economic Outlook report that retained the global economic growth forecast for 6%, right, specifically in the year of 2021, right. So it is the report which is basically published by the International Monetary Fund, that analyze some sort of the key parts of the International Monetary Fund's surveillance of the economic development as well as the policies related to the member countries in their respective countries. So it is also projects some sort of a developments in the global financial markets as well as the ecosystem services, economic services, sorry, right. And it is basically prepared twice a year, right, and it is basically used specifically in the meetings of the International Monetary and the Financial Committee, right. And the reports basically which is provided, it basically analyze as well as forecast the economic development, okay, as well as the policies specifically in the member countries, and it also encapsulates the state of the global economy, right, as well as highlights the risk and the uncertainties that could threaten the growth of the world economies. The report is basically the main instrument of the dissemination of the findings and analysis of the global surveillance activities to the world. So this World Economic Outlook database is created by annual exercise, that means a twice a year exercise that basically begins in January and June every year, right, and that is basically related to the publication. Now let us understand the key findings of this report. So first of all, let us understand the findings pertaining to the India. So the report basically says that the growth will decline, right, or the growth decline from the expected forecast. So here the International Monetary Fund or IMF cuts its economic growth forecast for India from previously 12.5% to 9.5% for the fiscal year to the March 31st 2022, okay, as the onset of the severe COVID, that is the second wave, cuts into the recovery mechanism. Then the slow recovery, the report further says that the growth prospects in India have been downgraded because of the severe second COVID wave during the March and the May, and expected the slow recovery in the confidence from that setback. Then the vaccination penetration is low, right. It is also says that since India was lagging in the vaccination, the economic activities may be further affected in India, okay. Now let us understand the findings of the report with respect to the global scenario. So first of all, the vaccination penetration impact. So here, according to the report, the vaccination penetration is basically is most important aspect in the countries with high vaccination coverage, such as the UK, the Canada, where the high vaccination penetration is there, including the USA, right. The impact would be mild, while the countries which are lagging in the vaccination, such as India or Indonesia, the suffer would be more, right, among the countries. And the close to the 40% of the population in the advanced economies have been fully vaccinated, right, and that is just 11% in these emerging markets economies, right, as well as very tiny fractions of the population, specifically in the low income countries or the developing countries, have been vaccinated. So this inequity in terms of penetration would definitely impact, right, the recovery of the economies throughout the world. Then the global economy to grow, that is the global economy is projected to grow 6%, right, in 2021, and 4.9% in 2022, that is further down, right. And 2021 global growth forecast is unchanged from the April 2021 in that respect. Then definitely it has also been provided the widening gap between advanced economies and many emerging markets and the developing economies. So it says that the global economic recovery continues, but there is definitely a gap between these economies. Then the data is also related to the per capita loss. So here the pandemic have reduced the per capita incomes in almost all economies. So for example, in the advanced economies, the per capita income have been reduced by 2.8%, right. Specifically, when you compare with the pre-pandemic times or the trends, which is over 2020 to 2022, right. And specifically in the emerging markets, in the developing economies, that is excluding the China, the per capita loss or the per capita income loss is registered of around 6.3% in a year. So that is a huge gap. In the advanced countries, that is just 2.8%, but in the emerging markets and developing countries, that is 6.3%. So definitely, that is a huge gap. Next, you have the Immigration Bill 2021. So here recently the Ministry of External Affairs have put the Immigration Bill 2021 in the public domain for the inputs, right. So that the public could elicit their opinions related to the immigration bill. So here the bill seeks a long overdue opportunity to reform this recruitment process, specifically for the nationals seeking employment abroad, right, specifically the countries in the West Asia or the Gulf countries. So this bill will be soon tabled, right, introduced in the parliament for that purpose. So let us understand about the Parent Act, that is Immigration Act 1983. So currently all labor recruitment is done through this labor or this Immigration Act 1983. This act talks about the labor migration, that is related to the migration of the labor, right, abroad, specifically in the West Asia as well as in the Gulf countries, right. The recruiting agencies, the middlemen should be the government certified. Whoever is recruiting those persons from India to those Gulf countries should be, those recruitment agency or the middleman should be government certified. And it also talks in detail about the recruitment charges, right, also the minimum service conditions that could be provided. So definitely this Immigration Act sought to provide the rights of the individuals which are ultimately going to abroad for these jobs. So now let us understand Immigration Bill 2021, what it has going to change this Immigration Act 1983. So first of all, the bill was introduced in June 2021. It will replace as well as improvise the previous act, that is Immigration Act 1983. So that Immigration Bill 2021 will replace the original act. Now there is the new policy of the division, where the Immigration Policy Division is launched under the Ministry of External Affairs, and it will definitely help set up the help desks and the welfare committees for the welfare of the migrant workers, right. And the draft bill basically seeks to create the two authorities, that is first of all the BEPP, that is Bureau of Immigration Policy and Planning. The Bureau of Immigration Policy and the Planning, that its function will consist of the preparing the policies on the matters which is related to the welfare of the immigrants, right. So it will prepare the policies which is related to the welfare of immigrants and negotiating the labor and the social security agreement with these destination countries like West Asia and Gulf. So this Bureau of Immigration Policy and the Planning is the one authority. Second is the BEA, that is the Bureau of Immigration Administration, that is it will work on maintaining some sort of a database, right, that is Indian immigrants that left the countries for the work, and as well as it will also maintain the database related to the implementation measures, the program for the welfare of these immigration peoples. Okay, now there are a lot of issues, first of all, right, in the migrant workers. What are the issues and why we are concerning? So there are large recruitment charges. So there are huge recruitment charges by these middlemen, by these recruitment agencies. There is contract substitution also, right. one person's context will be substituted by another person, or there is a deception, right? There is a theft, there is passport retention, right? Then there is a non-payment of the wages, there is poor living condition, right? Specifically in the destination countries, there is also discrimination, right? There is ill treatment, specifically in the destination countries. There are medical problems like heart attacks, respiratory failures, etc. Lot of problems are there. So in that backdrop, there is huge significance of that bill. So it definitely increases the accountability of these brokers and other intermediaries who were basically involved in the labor hiring from India to these Gulf countries. And that will definitely the exploitative behavior of these middlemen, the intermediaries, right? All such, the persons who are involved in the recruitment of these persons, the recruitment agencies towards the migrants, could be curtailed with the help of this act, right? So definitely there are huge issues related to the human rights, right? Huge issue related to the female inclusive bill, or the lack of the workers representation in the bill. So definitely the bill is comparatively, is great development over the previous bill, that is Immigration Act 1983. But we have to see that how it could be able to solve the problems. Okay, next you have the James Webb Space Telescope. So recently the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, that is NASA, that is the USA's premier space agency, is set to launch the James Webb Space Telescope. Okay, and it will be, the large infrared telescope with approximately of 6.5 meters primary mirror, and it will be a premier observatory, right? It will be a premier observatory, right, of the next decade, that will basically serving the thousands of the astronomers worldwide. And it's considered the successor of, it is considered the successor of the Hubble Space Telescope, right? And it will basically also study every phase in the history of the universe, that is ranging from, that is the first luminous, glows after the Big Bang, to the formation of, solar system, right? And that is also capable of supporting the life on the planets of the Earth, to the evolution of the solar system. So it will basically try to understand these phenomena. And it was previously known as the Next Generation Space Telescope, but it was renamed, right, in 2002, right, after a former NASA administrator, that is James Webb. Okay, now under under his tenure of this administrator of NASA, right, the NASA launched over 75 space science missions, that is including this probe that were basically sent to the Mars and the Venus. So to recognize the contribution that was made by the administrator of the NASA, James Webb, it has been renamed in the memory of James Webb. So definitely it's an international collaboration between the NASA, the European Space Agency, and the Canadian Space Agency, right? And the NASA, the Space Flight Center is basically managing the development effort of this basically the telescope, right? So it's of great, importance, right, for the NASA, right, that is basically related to the development of all activities. Next you have the Buon Retiro Park and the Paseo del Prado. So recently the UNESCO has added the Madrid's, or the Spain's, historic, the Paseo del Prado and the Retiro Park, to its list of the World Heritage Sites. So Spain's two sites have been recently been added to the World Heritage Sites. So UNESCO basically describes the locations, right, as a landscape of the arts and the sciences, that are basically putting them under the list of the cultural sites under the UNESCO's World Heritage list. Okay, the area is exceptional because it is the first, promenade within the city limits of all European cities and the capitals, that is for the enjoyment of all the citizens without the distinction of the strata and the class, right? And becoming a site can help attract more tourists from around the world. And Spain has already 49 sites inscribed under the list of the UNESCO's World Heritage list, and the 43 sites out of these 49 sites basically comes under the cultural list, right? And the 4 are basically, under the natural list, and 2 are basically the mixed list. So now let us understand about first the Paseo del Prado. The Paseo del Prado is basically, a wide tree lined avenue, right? That is basically the home to the prominent and the prestigious buildings such as the Prado Museum. So it features the several other prominent structures, that is including of the square, right? Prominent structure including the squares with historic marble structures, right? With the fountains, right? As well as the Plaza de Cibeles, that is described as the iconic symbol of the city. So it has been first, the street of this kind to be open to all the citizens, as previously the park, like, the open that will be open to the upper classes specifically for that purpose. Okay. The next is the Retiro Park. The Retiro Park is nothing but 125 hectares, the green space that is located just, the off to the Paseo del Prado, right? That is the first site, and it is one of the city's most visited attractions by the tourist. So Al Retiro, that is, the meaning that is called the retreat. Okay, that was originally a palace, as well as the gardens that was built for the personal use of the King Philip IV in 17th century, 17th AD. So it was that originally the palace and the gardens that was built for the personal use of this King Philip IV, and that memory, this Retiro Park is basically there, and now this whole structure is basically recognized as a World Heritage Site for that purpose. Next, the Thane Creek Flamingo Sanctuary. So recently the Maharashtra, right, mangrove cell have recently proposed to declare the Thane Creek Flamingo Sanctuary, which is a biodiversity rich, right, as the Ramsar site. So it will be redesigned as a Ramsar site. So this Thane Creek Flamingo Sanctuary, which is also known as the TCFS, is spreading around 1690 hectares the land, and it is Mumbai's biggest open spaces, right, in the basically in the congested urban area, and it is basically spreading across the Mulund, Vikhroli, right, the Bhandup, the Kanjur, and the parts of the Mandale village, right, that is surrounded by the highly urbanized areas, and it is also, home to the 12 true the mangrove species as well as 39 mangrove associates. It is also consisting of 167 species of the birds, that including of the flamingo. It is also consisting of the 45 fish species, 59 species of the butterfly, 67 insect species, and there are other mammals like jackals was also present in that area. So in May 2018, right, the state has declared it as a Flamingo Sanctuary. So the Flamingo Sanctuary was basically declared in May 2018, and it is, if approved, it will be the first such site in the Mumbai municipal metropolitan region, and it will be the third in the Maharashtra to be designed as the Ramsar site in the basically the Maharashtra. So now let us understand about the Ramsar site. So Ramsar site is basically, which are declared, they are generally as a wetland area, which are designed to be the international importance under the Ramsar Convention. What is Ramsar Convention? The Ramsar Convention is basically the intergovernmental treaty or intergovernmental environmental treaty, right, that basically provides the framework for the national action as well as the international cooperation for the conservation and the wide use of the wetlands and their resources. So definitely, what is the advantage of incorporation of these sites in the Ramsar? So it will help in the conservation as well as the wise use of the wetlands, right. There will also the national and the international cooperation for the conservation and management, right, of these the sites. There will also the boosting of the tourism, generating the employment, right, the economic benefits as well as creation of the awareness for the conservation of the wetlands, right, including other wetlands also. Next, the Garib Nawaz Employment Scheme. So here the Maulana Azad Foundation, or Maulana Azad Education Foundation, which is an autonomous body under the aegis of the Ministry of Minority Affairs, implements the Garib Nawaz Employment Scheme. Okay, the main aim of this Garib Nawaz Employment Scheme is to provide a short-term job-oriented skills development courses to the minority youths, right, in order to enable them to skill-based employment, right, so that they could get the skill-based employment with the help of this skill-oriented development courses. So this scheme will be implemented as per the common norms of the Ministry of Skill and the Development and Entrepreneurship, that is MSD&E, that is Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, that is basically the program implementation agencies. So definitely it is of greater importance for that purpose. Now let us understand about the constitutional provisions related to the minorities. So first of all, Constitution of India does not specify the term minorities or does not define the term minorities. However, the Constitution also recognizes the two types of minorities, that is religious minorities and linguistic minorities. So there are certain articles in our Constitution which provide certain safeguard to those minorities, including fundamental rights, that is Article 29 and Article 30, right. Article 29 basically is related to the protection of the interest of the minorities by making a provision, right, of any citizen section of the citizen having the distinct language, right, distinct language or distinct script, the distinct culture, right, having the right to conserve that, right. So right to conserve for that distinct language, script and culture, right. And it mandated that there will be no discrimination would be done on the grounds of the religion, race, caste, language or any of them. What is Article 30? Article 30 says that all minorities, whether it is based on the religious or it is based on the language, shall have the right to establish, right. So that is right to establish and administer the educational institutions, right, of their choice. So that is also the very important article. Then Article 350B, that is the special officer for the linguistic minority, that is to be appointed by the president. So here there shall be a the special officer for the linguistic minority that will be appointed by the president of our country. The main duty of this special officer is to investigate the matters related to the safeguard which is provided to the linguistic minorities under the Constitution of India. Next, you have this phosphatic rock. So here the Union Minister of Chemicals and the Fertilizers informed the Parliament that India will definitely explore the indigenous deposits of the phosphatic rock, that is in order to make the India as a Atmanirbhar in the fertilizer production, because phosphatic fertilizer is also of the greater importance for the agricultural purpose. So the phosphorus rocks or the phosphate rocks are basically unprocessed ores. So for phosphate rock deposits can be a sedimentary, that is formed from the sediments that is deposited by water or air, or it could be the igneous, that is the solidified magma or solidified lava, that is basically solidified. However, the easiest way to obtain this phosphorus is by the way of mining or the concentrated phosphate rock from the phosphatic deposits. So definitely it is of greater importance, and the phosphate may be derived from the variety of the sources, including the marine invertebrates, in some sort of a cells of the calcium phosphatic, as well as the bones and excrements of the vertebrates in that respect. Now let us understand about the uses of the phosphatic rocks. So it is a basically key raw materials for the DAP fertilizers as well as the nitrogen, phosphorus and potassic fertilizers in our country. So phosphorus cannot be substituted by any other minerals, and it is very vital for the number of the regions, specifically in the agriculture. So it basically plays a major role in the photosynthesis and the energy transfer in the plants. Further, as you know that it is basically very essential for the production of the seed and the root formation in the plants. So it promotes the plant maturity, the stalk strength, and it is also resistant to the plant root diseases. So currently India is 90% dependent on the import for this rock phosphate. So you can understand that 90% of this the need for this rock phosphate is basically met through from this import. So it is basically of greater worry for India. And let us understand about the phosphorus deposits. So phosphatic rocks are basically are majority produced only from the two states in India, that is from the Rajasthan as well as from Madhya Pradesh, right? And currently there are around 30 lakh million tons of the phosphorite deposits in our country, that is existing deposits, okay, and for which the important steps have been already been taken specifically to ramp up the production. For example, these deposits are available in the Rajasthan, okay, that is the central part of the peninsular India, that is also the Hirapur in the Madhya Pradesh, right, the Lalitpur in the Uttar Pradesh, the Mussoorie specifically in the Uttarakhand, the Kadapa basin specifically in Andhra Pradesh. There are certain also deposits lies with that. Okay, next you have the exercise Indra 21. So it is recently the 12th edition of the Indo-Russia joint military exercise, which is named as Indra 2021, will be held at the Volgograd in the Russia from 1st to the 13th of August 2021. This exercise will definitely conduct in the backdrop of the counter-terrorism operations, right, under the United Nations mandate by the joint force against the international terror groups by India and Russia. So it has of greater significance. So definitely the exercise Indra 21 will strengthen the mutual confidence of the Russian forces as well as the Indian forces, Indian armies, and it will definitely enable the sharing of the best practices, right, between the contingents of both of these countries. So this exercise will yet another milestone in the strengthening of the security cooperation, and that will also serve to reinforce the long-standing bond of the friendship between India and Russia. As you know that India and Russia are already having a good relationship between these two countries. Then exercise the Cutlass Express 2021. So it is the Indian naval ship Talwar is participating in the exercise Cutlass Express 2021, specifically along the east coast of Africa. So this exercise Cutlass Express is an annual maritime exercise which is conducted to promote the national and the regional maritime security, right, specifically in the East Africa, right, or you can say that on the eastern coast of Africa, right, as well as to the western Indian Ocean. Now, the main purpose of this exercise is to have the maritime security, the national and the regional maritime security. It is an annual maritime exercise. Okay, so it is a 2021 edition. This exercise basically involved the participation of the 12 Eastern African countries, including the US, UK, India, and various international organizations, like you have the International Maritime Organization or IMO, right? Then you have the UNODC, that is the United Nations Office on the Drug and the Crime, because there is the piratation or the pirate activities are also there. Then you have the Interpol. The Interpol is also participating because there is a huge scope for the security challenges. Then you have the critical maritime routes, Indian Ocean, as well as the Somalia for that purpose. Okay, next, the Indian Navy is basically participating in this exercise in a trainer role. So it will basically train the Eastern African countries, right, as a trainer, and it's focusing on the East Africa's coastal regions, and it is designed to assess and to improve the combined maritime law enforcement capacity of these East African countries as to promote the national and the regional security, to increase the interoperability between the regional navies. So that is through the exercise, the information sharing and information flow between the various partner countries with respect to the maritime domains awareness is the key focus of this exercise. So definitely what the participation of India would contribute to achieving this goal, and India's commitment to the countries along the east coast of Africa as well as the western Indian Ocean is further going to be strengthened, right, with the visit of the INS Talwar, which is currently being at the west or to the East Africa, and it is keeping with the India's strategy towards a maritime cooperation in the Indian Ocean region, that is Vision Sagar. Sagar means the security and the growth for all. So India is having the vision of the Sagar, that is security and the growth for all, specifically in this region. Next, you have the scheme for the economic empowerment of the DNT communities, that is also known as SEED. So recently the department have approved the special schemes that is named as the scheme for the economic empowerment of the denotified communities, that is known as the DNT communities. The scheme name is SEED, for the welfare of the community, to provide, right, the main purpose is to provide or is to enable them to appear in the competitive examinations through the coaching, right, and to provide the health insurance to them, right, to facilitate the livelihood initiative at the community level, as well as to provide the financial assistance for the construction of the houses for the members of these denotified communities. Now let us understand about these denotified tribes. So it has been first of all, this term called denotified tribes, it is standing for all those communities that were basically considered as a criminal tribes. So they were notified under the Criminal Tribes Act. Okay, they are enforced by the British Raj in between 1871 and 1947. Then ultimately this act was repealed. So this Criminal Tribes Act was basically repealed, and it was basically added by or replaced by the another act that is known as the Denotified Communities Act. So a few of these communities were listed specifically in the denotified, that were also the nomadic. Okay, and if you consider the status of India, it has been estimated that the South Asia, right, has the world largest nomadic population. In India, roughly 10% of the population is denotified and nomadic, right? Well, the number of the denotified tribes in India, that is around 150, and the population of the nomadic tribes consisting of around 500 different communities that is residing in our country. So these denotified tribes were almost settled in the various states of the country, right? And these nomadic communities continue to be the largely nomadic in the pursuit of their traditional professions. And in 2014, the government of India also has constituted the National Commission for the Denotified, Nomadic and Semi-Nomadic Tribe, right? So this commission was basically set up, that is known as the National Commission for Denotified, Nomadic and Semi-Nomadic Tribes, for the period of 3 years. Right, to prepare a statewide list of these castes belong to these denotified and nomadic tribes, and to suggest certain measures with respect to these tribes, right, that will ultimately be taken by the central government for their welfare. Okay, next you have the housing provisions for the transgender persons. So here the Ministry of Social Justice and the Empowerment have initiated the 12 pilot projects, right, or pilot shelter homes, that is providing the financial assistance to the community based organizations for setting up of these shelter homes, that is also known as the Garima Grah for the transgender persons. So here, according to 2011 census, the total population of the transgender in our country is around 4.8 lakh, but only 30,000 transgenders are registered with the Election Commission, right? And the estimates suggest that there are around 50 to 60 lakh transgenders in our country, but most keep it a secret to avoid the discrimination. So there is a huge discrimination also against these transgenders, and there are, according to 2011 census itself, it is suggested that there are 54,854 transgender children that is below the age of 6 years, right? So on the educational fronts, the pass percentage of the transgender persons for class 10th have decreased by around 15.79%, and those for class 12 have decreased by 16.66%. So you can see that there is huge discrimination also in the education front. And on the health front, you can say that there is huge the issues related to the HIV, that is the human immunovirus, right, the sexual transmitted infections or STI or STDs among the transgender populations. There is lack of awareness, institutional discrimination, which constitute the biggest challenge for these transgender communities. And definitely the mental needs or mental health needs is also most important for the transgender community, that is barely addressed, right, for them. So the government should be sincere enough to incorporate and to provide these facilities to those transgenders. All right, so that's all for today. Thank you very much. We'll meet again tomorrow for next current affairs. Thank you very much.